What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Play the Fight Song College Football Show. Another offseason week is upon us, and it is time to talk college football a little early this week. Some schedule mishaps moved the show up to Monday, but we always relish at the chance to talk this beautiful sport. And tonight we get to focus on the GE5, a group that we always talk about throughout the entire season. But tonight, the main part of the show will be dedicated towards it outside of recent news, which, of course, we will cover as well. Along with it, maybe some fun uniform talk at the end. If not, we'll definitely get to it next week. Let's start off tonight's show by hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button if you're on our YouTube channel. If you're not, hit the like button wherever you're at, and then go on over to the YouTube, hit the subscribe on that. We need to get to 1,000 before the start of next season. We've been stuck around 850. You have the power to make it change. So please do so and hit the subscribe button today. We love you and appreciate you being here. The boys are also here. Jake, how we doing tonight? Little late arrival for you in the studio. You're the reason we started late. Why is that happening?
Oh, it looks like it's 7:04. That's all right. I just hope my it was chilly night, first of all. It was chilly night. And then second of all, I hope the mic can bear with me this week. I know you listen back.
No, I didn't. I just heard from some people. But I appreciate the feedback, by the way. That means you're listening.
We don't like your feedback, but we like our fans' feedback.
Yeah. So we're trying to make it better. We're just giving out some hope. It's not something I purposefully try to do and ruin your experience.
And honestly, we don't know what causes it.
No, we don't
figure that out yet.
Not technology gurus.
It's not the best sounding thing in the world. JP, how are you doing tonight? Are you ready to talk a little G5 ball? I mean, I always get excited talking about the G5.
I'm pumped. I'm really, interested to talk about one of these first topics we got rolling up here. But I am excited to kind of give some highlights of the G5 and focus an episode on it. As we did a lot of the recap of the year, and a lot of the recap of the year was like we had our G5 mentions and stuff, but we never really had a chance to really talk about specific players, coaches, and things like that. So giving it the spotlight that we say we do, and just following through on that promise that it's about all 134.
We absolutely will follow through on that promise tonight. Let's lead off the show with a little something light, though. Let's talk in general of college football. This is something that we probably haven't done over our 84, 85 episodes now. But I want to ask you guys a question. I had it down on the doc. Hopefully you got a chance to write down a few thoughts on maybe putting it into words, because it's a tough thing to do because we love and value the sport so much. But what makes college football great? Why is it your favorite sport? Why should everybody tune into it? And why should everybody listen to us? And where does our passion lie within the sport? Jake, you go first.
Yeah, I know that we've answered this question probably in bits and pieces in our lifetime, but I'm going to try to go outside the box and an answer that I haven't really thought about in a while, or haven't really shared. The reason personally that I have come to love college football, and it's really stemmed from honestly doing this the last couple of years, as well as like just going on going to different environments and like talking to people. College football to me is something that just connects a lot of different people from different places. One common interest. And it's just love the sport, the love for the program, the passion that they have. We're going to stay on college football here, but the world isn't all sunshine and roses, and we have a lot of differences, specifically online with how we treat people sometimes. But when you get to the nuts and bolts of it, like college football, passion I have for the Iowa State Cyclones, Cam, you have for Nebraska, like we all have that common theme, that common ground together. We may hate each other for rivals, things like that, but like it's the sport that we love so much. And like I said, going to like West Virginia and BYU and things I've done in the past, just like hearing from other people about their experiences, why they love going to games and things like that. And as someone who
I may be on a podcast. I'm not like the most, I wouldn't say I'm the most outgoing person in the world, but when it comes to finding a common ground with a stranger, just talking about college football, maybe their experience with the sport is something I just absolutely love doing and love talking to people about.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I think just the different opinions and topics, and that's kind of how I'll roll into mine is I love college football because I think it's the only sport on the national scale where it's of size of everybody loves football, right? Well, college football gives everybody the chance to have representation from California to Maine, from Washington to Florida. There's teams everywhere. There's going to be multiple within a state, whether it's at the FBS level or not, who cares? You still have a college football team somewhere that you can cheer for, whether it's South Dakota State or University of South Dakota, go all the way down to Texas. How many programs do they have maybe that not are the University of Texas or A&M? It's just great. It's my state versus your state. It's a reason to talk trash. It's something to look forward to. And having representation is huge because I think that's a big time component onto why we find a lot of our passion into college football rather than the NFL is, the NFL, there's 32 teams. There's only 32 cities that can be in. If they're not in their city where you can consistently go be a part of the atmosphere, where it's a part on your daily sports talk radio, things like that attribute to your fandom. And the NFL just doesn't give it as much as college football offers it up to people just because of how diverse the sport is in different areas. I think traditions are a huge part of college football you always hear, but even some traditions that you may not hear about a lot, but just the smaller ones, just singing songs at games, how the entire fan base sings Dixieland Delight at Alabama, or just travel across the country. And how about Enter Sandman to run into a Virginia Tech game, whether it's a Thursday night or a Saturday night, doesn't matter. You could think everything is a Friday night and nobody has work the next day because they're all so dedicated to be a fan of that team. And so within the moment, it's gotten to me the last few years that I look forward to this as much as anybody would look forward to a vacation that works 90 hours a week, right? Like I look at a Nebraska football game, and to me, that is, I'm pushing the Nebraska season. This is now my next thing I'm looking forward to is, late August, we'll be back in the stadium. I get to enjoy, a slice of Valentino's pizza, just those little small things I haven't taken for granted, just that college football offers us. Because even the pros, they have these big menu items, gigantic cookies, even down to the smaller scale. I just want a piece of pizza out of a cardboard box in Memorial Stadium. Name one other or name an NFL team. You can't because it doesn't apply, and it doesn't apply to most colleges. But Nebraska's stadium, if you didn't know this, Memorial Stadium becomes the third highest populated area in Nebraska on game day. Memorial Stadium itself, 90,000 people is the third highest population in Nebraska. All the state comes together in one spot and equivalates to the third highest population. That's the coolest thing ever, and it can only be a part of college football. So I love it. All the way down to the smallest minuscule things through and through. It's just the best sport in the world. And if you're not watching it, you're missing out. And the NFL will never offer and match the energy that college football will provide everyone. JP.
Yeah, I wrote down like bullet points because I don't want to try and write this out and try to follow word by word and be a little more authentic with it. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the uniqueness, and it's tied with traditions. It's tied with the school that you either attended or you've been a fan of forever. Just what makes each school unique is so different than the next, right? Like there are stories you'll hear at Appalachian State that you won't hear at Stanford, that you won't hear at UCLA, that you won't hear at Sam Houston, that you won't hear at Michigan. Like it's all very different, right? And people take real pride in that. Like it feels very true to the roots of the school. It feels very true to the roots of the state that it's in, the town that it's in, and what kind of happens within a fan base of that. I feel like that holds a lot of pride. Like you can be a Dallas Cowboy fan in the state of Alabama, and like you can like feel like some passion for the star and like that whole song and dance. But to me, it's not the same thing as this kid that grew up in middle of nowhere, Ohio, and just is a massive Ohio State fan, and like he feels connected to that school. It's very Ohio, like it's how they do. Like I don't know, I feel like the organizations and the schools do a lot better to connect with the areas around them and become kind of part of that region and that state. And obviously there's a lot of states with multiple schools. Like you look at Iowa, that's a state of over 3 million, and it's split in half between two major universities. If there was a pro team here, I feel like it would lose its luster. Like it just wouldn't hold a candle because a lot of the people that are fans of Iowa State or Iowa went to school there or have been going to these games forever, have, had family traditions tied into universities that you could never, like there's going to be professional stories about what stories of families have been going to Pittsburgh Steeler games forever or Bengal games forever. And they're like, that's their thing. But you can't walk into that atmosphere and tell me that, Kinnick or Jack Trice is not better than walking into an NFL stadium or walking into, if App is good, like into Brewer Stadium, Kid Brewer Stadium, and walking in and be like, this place is just electric, and just feel electricity through it and like some real passion and stuff through it. It's as close as you can get to a cult without calling yourself a cult as college football fandom in some ways. Like you're undividedly like about this overarching idea. Basically is what it is this idea, is this fandom, this school, this team. And it's all about, that logo on the side and the name across the front. And everybody's got the same idea and they'll defend it till they die, but it's not quite a cult, but it's as close as you can get to one without being it. And then the last thing is like the abundance of random stars and stories that come out of this sport. You turn on the NFL, most stars and stories are going to, there's 5 or 6 in the NFL that come out every year and they're like, that's a star. He'll be there for another 8 years or whatever. But random Tuesday nights in the MAC, you're going to hear a name. Somebody's going to remember that name for the rest of their life. Like whether they bet on the game, they were just watching the game, something happens in that game. Jordan Lynch isn't a name that's ever going to make sense in the NFL, but you'll never forget that name if you're a college football fan. You go through every conference, every team, and there's just a random story or star that pops up and you'll never forget. We'll never forget Grayson McCall's time at Coastal. You'll never forget Ashton Jeanty at Boise State. You'll never forget all these random things, right? Chris Davis at Auburn, like just random things that happen that make the story or the sport so great. And the story is just so incredible. I just think it holds everything above the NFL and what that league is.
I was going to say too, like, doesn't college football, I know now more than ever, it's kind of going away from that, but doesn't it feel like a working class product compared to the NFL? Whereas
corporatized.
Yeah, I'm sure Ohio State fans would beg to differ, but college football tickets to at least 1 or 2, 3 games a year are pretty reasonable. Like how many people I bet you could walk down the street and meet a lot more people who have attended maybe a college football game than a NFL game, just because of the prices. Maybe it's where you live, where like an NFL city is and things like that. But it just feels like it appeals to like, it's easier said than done being from Iowa and Nebraska that, this is our pro team. And for the most part, I mean, Nebraska has got some pretty high tickets, but I'm sure you could go to the UTEP game, first game of the year with your kids, make them experience that in Memorial Stadium for a decent dollar. It's not going to run you dry. Whereas going to see the Vikings and Panthers is probably triple the price. You know what I mean? So I feel like it appeals more to the working class as well. And just everybody can relate to that. I would love to see that study. Like how many people have been to a college football game and how many people have been to an NFL game?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to put it. I think we oftentimes are not compare the NFL to college football throughout this show, just because that's the conversation that always pops up. I want to ask you guys one question to finish it. What do you guys feel on? They show you, everybody always says college football is full of blowouts. That's what they all say, right? All NFL fans. It's just, there's so many blowouts. Everybody blows everybody out. What is your response to that?
There's 134 teams. There's a lot more variability.
It's sample size. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, didn't Philadelphia not beat Washington by 40 points this weekend?
Yeah. I was going to say that and just like, I don't know where people got the perception of every game in the NFL is like down to the wire too. Obviously it's more close. There's 32 teams. Like you guys said, the parity is way bigger, but
right.
It's not about
professional. It's the best 32 teams in the world. It's the best X amount of players in the world. That's like comparing Premier League soccer to like local high school soccer here in Iowa. Like it's different because there's I don't know how many Premier League teams there are. If I'm being completely honest with you, there's hundreds and hundreds of teams here in Iowa of different levels, right? It's like
the difference between Alabama and Sam Houston is not even remotely the same between the Panthers and the Chiefs. Right? I mean, the Chiefs took the Panthers to the wire, but I don't know when the argument ever became about college football, like how many close games there are. I don't think it's just
you needed an extra piece of ammo. They couldn't think of anything else. They're like, oh, there's
Yeah.
blowouts. There's blowouts.
And here's the deal, guys. There are 134 teams. And if you care about the sport enough and you sit down and watch football all day, there are at least probably 3 really good close games. You just got to go out there and find them. I'm sorry, not every Alabama Ohio State game is down to the absolute last second wire. That's just not how the college game works. That's not how any college sport works, for that matter. If you watch college basketball or college soccer, I don't know.
I also make the argument, I hear pretty often of people say, well, the overall football's better. Yeah, no shit.
no
Like,
shit.
it's made up of college football all-stars. Like, you realize at one point in 98.9% of those careers, those guys were really good in college. Like, at one point, they were that level in college. They were the different person that was putting up statistics in college that got them to the NFL most of the time. Sometimes you have those stories here and there, but overall, yes, the football is going to be better. One, because the sample size is different. If you had 134 NFL teams, I promise you there'd be some bad football mixed in there.
Well,
So
I'd make the argument too, and I go back and forth on this all the time, as I grew up playing basketball most of my life. Like, the difference between bad basketball and good basketball is insurmountable. Like, not so clean, like rugged college football, depending on the matchups. Maybe it's Army Navy. It's not the cleanest, it's not the most beautiful football in the world, but it's still awesome to watch. I think ugly football can be masked up better than basketball. And at the same time, I don't think the NFL is perfect either, because I think it's becoming more of a, just the sport of football in general is becoming more of a 7-on-7 kind of league. Like, I think quarterback play in the NFL is not nearly as good as it was a decade ago. I know that's not our conversation, but for just to that argument, I would argue the NFL's play hasn't been as perfect either.
I wouldn't say no to that. I mean, you don't have, outside of Patrick Mahomes conversation, you don't have like the Tom Brady or the Peyton Manning that you had, where it's going to be battles like that. Like, you're going to compare that to Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Okay. But NFL, let's leave it there. I wanted to talk a little bit on why college football is the best sport on the earth. Speaking of college football, let's go into recent news about that sport. Let's first lead it off with Ohio State's room emptying out, and let's start in the offensive coordinator room with Chip Kelly heading to that NFL league we were just talking about, to the Las Vegas Raiders to be their offensive coordinator. This room's getting pretty empty. What do you guys think on this move? Are you shocked by it? Obviously, 1 year, couple $1 million in his pocket and a national title, and hey, might as well go hit the tables in Vegas. What do you think about the move, Jake?
It makes my my Ryan Day take after the national title, like, we're going to find out this year, right? Like, he's going to have some talent, on his roster. I don't know if it'll be as talented as last year. We'll have to wait and see. He returns a lot of big pieces, but now he's going to be without 2 of the best coordinators in the sport. And where does he go from here? And also, we haven't really heard much. Like, does Ryan Day take over play calling again? I doubt it. I think he's now seen the difference between when he's calling plays and when he's not. I would guess he stays away from that, but it's going to be hard, man. At this point in the year, what is it? We're February now. Who's going to be better than Chip Kelly calling plays at this point? So really interested to see where they go. And I think Ryan Day, I don't want to say I'm a hater. I'm just skeptical, but there's a lot more of haters out there that are going to be like, all right, man, go and prove it again. Go and prove it without Knowles. Go and prove it without Kelly.
It's going to be interesting to follow. JP, what do you think about the Chip Kelly move? And Ohio State in general, I guess.
Got to take the money. But
yeah,
he stayed as an offensive coordinator, and I feel like that's maybe where he's comfortable. So I think if you get offered that kind of money to do exactly what you want, and you no longer have to deal with the schedule of college football coaching at this moment in time, go to the NFL. Maybe he's a big Vegas guy. Maybe he just loves the aura of Vegas. Maybe that's all it is.
Making $6 million in Vegas doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world.
What is that comparison? Like, making 6 in Vegas is like making what in Omaha? Like, that's what that makes you think of.
Probably like
that
50,
you think. Yeah, probably
15.
10 or 15.
It's just one of those things that, like, I think it works out for Chip Kelly, which is good. Like, he got the job he kind of wanted. He goes back to the NFL. He's still an offensive coordinator. Ohio State wise, I feel like it's more, how do you keep kids in a position to win when you're turning it over that much? Like, they continue to recruit really well in high school. But you're going to have to bring in portal pieces at some point in time to play for these guys. And they've got to fit what Ryan Day is thinking. They have to fit into this scheme, whatever they end up trying to do. Are they going to stay run heavy? Are they going to change it up a little bit? What does Ryan Day want to do at this point in time? Because he changed an identity this year and it ended up working out for him. Is he going to stay along that path? So it's what kind of hire does he make within the scheme, and what's he want to do scheme wise?
Not that it goes out the window in the NFL, but one thing that I always get not mad at, but it kind of feels like a loss for the ability of some of these coaches is I think Chip Kelly's pretty underrated recruiter in the minds of most people. Like the amount of talent he got to different places. Obviously, Ohio State, you got a loaded deck, but Oregon, the amount of talent he brought in there, even UCLA, he recruited well. Like his ability to recognize offensive talent and have an offensive scheme with the guys that he brings in is pretty second to none. So I don't expect them to obviously have any worse of an offense this year, the Raiders that is, but Chip Kelly is definitely a step up in the right direction, and just a bad loss for the recruiting world of elite recruiters in college football is my opinion there. But let's move it down the line. Let's go to Ryan Grubb, who was hired as the new offensive coordinator at Alabama. DeBoer making moves. They needed to make this move. They struggled offensively in some spots this year later in the season. What do you think on this, JP? I'll go back to you first for this.
Hey, just a year delayed, right?
Right.
Maybe if we just figure out some things at the quarterback position, we figure out some things along the offensive line and the running back room, and maybe this works out like exactly how it has the last couple of stops for these two. They've been together for multiple stops now, and things continue to work out. I feel like this is just a comfortability hire, and that's not a slouch on making this kind of hire. I think it works out really well, as it's proven it has. And so to find somebody you're comfortable with, confident in, and that already shown like before he took the Seattle job that this is something he wanted to do. So I think that it's a great hire in that you're going to go right into this thing like hitting the ground running.
Jake.
I think it was when you get the NFL shot, you got to take it, right? And who's going to blame, Grubb for taking a chance on Pete Carroll and trying to run the Seattle Seahawks offense. Watched a couple Seahawks games this year. I think it just wasn't a perfect fit. I think Geno was pretty frustrated with him and Grubb. And sometimes you just see that because it's a hard transition, man, between the college game and working with NFL guys. But you root for a guy like Grubb because he's kind of from a neck of the woods in Iowa, which is also cool to see. And it's funny, I drove by Old Sioux Falls Stadium yesterday, as I literally live across the bridge from it, and just thinking about the national titles over there from their NAIA days together, and just out there, they're running it back. And it feels like, I don't know, a lot of great head coaches keep their coaching staffs together. It really doesn't change much in the history and success of that. Maybe they reunite and Grubb kills it again and we'll get another shot in the NFL. Or maybe he just learned his lesson and he's like, yeah, some coordinators just love to work with their head coach. Like they're more than work partners. They're like friends. And this is just a successful business that they run together. And it's maybe something Alabama desperately needs, because we sit here in February and they're going to have a quarterback project on their hands because we're not 100% sure what it's going to look like.
100%. All right, let's keep it moving because we're already 25 minutes in. A lot went to the college football discussion on what makes the best sport. So let's talk about one of the best conferences. Let's talk about the SEC. Their schedule drops. The note that we had on the sheet, which everybody can agree with, is it seems like they created a path for those bigger brands and those best teams to get into the playoff pretty easily. I think they took some grain of salt this year with the SEC not being in the national title, not having a representative in that game. And they're giving these guys a pretty clear path. They're bigger players, Georgia, teams like that, so on and so forth. That path to at least one of the spots of the 12-team playoff. What did you guys think on the schedule? Obviously, some people got a better hand, but it seems like those big dogs got the easier path. JP.
Yeah, I think you look at it and like this is all relative to the conference, right? I think we need to make sure that's known. We're not just saying these are easy schedules, but relative to the conference and some spots. And so the first one that kind of stood out to me was Georgia's. Alabama at home, Kentucky at home, Ole Miss at home, Texas at home. Like I mean, you get all of your, I would say, tougher games at home, which is a huge plus within any college football realm. And so those aren't easy games with Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, but you could convince me that Ole Miss won't be as good as it was this year. Alabama, we're kind of unsure of in some ways. We know they'll be good again. Like there was a good team this year. Like I know we knocked them in some ways about trying to get in the playoff at 9-3 and what they were, but that was still a good football team. And then Texas, just as good, maybe a little better, could be a little worse, right around that era. But then your road games are at Auburn. I know Jordan Hare's a little bit crazy, but at Mississippi State, at Tennessee. So, and then, you get your neutral with Florida. I think that one's like not easy, but on the easier end of the top dogs a little bit. Also kind of looking over towards Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Vandy. But their road games, Alabama, third Saturday in October, always electric. Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State. Florida, again, I think is going to be better. But if this, depends when you get them. You get them early, Swamp's going to be tough to go into. I think Tennessee knows that. They've been victims of it before. At Alabama's tough, but I think Kentucky, Mississippi State being 2 of your road games, I think is a big one there for sure. So, Jacob, I don't know if you had certain ones that kind of stood out to you schedule-wise, tough or easier, but I thought there was a couple bigger names there within the conference that maybe is on their rotation of an easier SEC schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to even find it, and I forgot that they kind of set this out like last month. But I mean, for Tennessee, like you said, Kentucky and Mississippi State on there is massive for them. For Nico's second year trying to go all chips on the table, and 2 of your road games towards the playoff is at basically 2 of the worst teams in the conference. I need to check. I do actually have it finally pulled up in front of me so I can talk as we go. But Texas has to go at Florida, at Georgia. And again, they also have Kentucky and Mississippi State. So the path to the playoff, both of the orange teams in the SEC feels more viable than ever again. Yeah. But I
think the big one here that is wishing their schedule was this year. How about Ole Miss? Right?
Yeah.
Arkansas, Florida, LSU, South Carolina, your home games away at Georgia. Again, there's your toughest one of the year. But then Oklahoma, who's going to be, they got to work, right, to, keep Venables' job and continue that upswing in the SEC. Mississippi State, Kentucky. I mean, I'm not calling them one of the bigger names in the SEC, but if we're talking based on this year and the expectations of this next year for Lane Kiffin, like I think 11-1 real possibility here. No,
what I would say so, but then again, we'll get into all the offseason talk where like culture, is this unstable in there, and you slip up to games like Kentucky at home. Maybe that's just something they learned from here, but we'll wait and see. Do you guys have Missouri's pulled up in front of you? What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you? It's like Drink
I don't know if you could draw it up better.
Like, how does Drink just keep getting these schedules? For anyone who's just listening on the pod, I was going to run it off quick. Yeah, 3rd in a row. Alabama at home, Mississippi State at home, South Carolina at home, a top 5 team, presumably, probably. Texas A&M at home. Your road games are at Arkansas. It's your rivalry game. You switch off every year. At Auburn, could be a really tough one. Jordan Hare's still a tough place to play. We'll see we'll see what they look like this year. At Oklahoma, at Vanderbilt. I just look at it as those are forced games where your opponent or your fans could travel to. Like, it's not a super daunting, destination to go to. Sure. And all 4 of those road games, I mean, a couple of them could have big years, but all of them could go 7-5 as well. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. And Missouri gets another good path.
Let's stay on the could go 7-5. How about a team that's really buying in for this year, right? Auburn you get Georgia and Alabama at home. Those are your 2 big ones, right? You get them both at home, your 2 big rivalry games. Also Kentucky, Missouri. Your road games are Arkansas, Oklahoma, A&M, Vandy. I think A&M scares you just environment based.
Yep.
And I think Oklahoma scares you if they're feeling good about themselves. But if not, like, you can go win there.
In Auburn too, like I was gonna say it's playoff or bust. I feel like this year, 3rd year with Hugh Freeze, and you have Georgia and Alabama both on the schedule.
I think we mentioned him a few times, and JP just briefly mentioned him, but Oklahoma's schedule is not easy. I mean, this is a team that could probably be depleted here, especially towards the end. They've got a few murderers rows towards the end, but you got to play Michigan in the non-con. And then looking at your conference games, you play at Tennessee, at Alabama, at South Carolina. Like for a Venables year where it's kind of make or break, it seems. It probably definitely is in minds
He's
of
gonna have to
Oklahoma
prove it.
fans. Yeah, this is one of their probably toughest prove it schedules you can have. Granted, it's on the other side of what you just got. You got Alabama at home, you got Tennessee at home, you couldn't capitalize there. So now you get to go on the road in some of the toughest environments in college football and try and save your job. Jake,
I
was something on the tip of your tongue.
No, I was kind of giving it a last second glance. I mean, other than that, I'm kind of good on. LSU feels like, yeah, favorable. Like if they're running it back with Nuss this year and things like that, like that's not the craziest schedule I've ever seen in the world. It's funny. There's not a schedule on here where I'm like, woof, but maybe that's like the perception we've built from not falling for the clickbait last year that we saw with all these SEC teams kind of beating each other up. And we're like, oh, it's the greatest league of all time and nobody else can compete in it. And it's like, I don't know.
And that's what's the most fun part about the sport is last year we probably all looked at the preseason schedule and be like, oh yeah, they get Vandy at home, like those are your wins. And all of a sudden Vandy's beating people that are ranked within the top 25. So you never know. It's the ever-changing sport. What looks good on paper right now probably is not going to be the same scenario come week 5. So it's the beauty of the sport. Let's move it down. Let's talk a little bit of tampering, recruiting, transfer portal wise, and my head guy, Matt Rule, was caught on the stand this week talking to the media for the first time in a while, and he said they're probably not going to play a spring game moving forward, at least a nationally televised one. That's what they want to stay away from, due to the fact that it gives coaches another opportunity to get a look at his players, make some decisions, throw a bunch of money at him, and he could lose out on players within his programs based upon what they show on their televised spring games. So he plans probably to go forward without doing one. I don't hate it. I do think people will follow suit with it, but it's just kind of the bad part of having a open window when people are playing in spring games, and people can do that. It does give them an early look into your team. And sometimes when you're a bigger brand that gets the people that are sick enough like me to watch it on television, then all of a sudden you're giving them another look to maybe take a few players or throw a few dollars around to try and get a player right before the season starts. What do you guys think on it? You guys are the one who put it in the notes, so I'll let JP go first.
Yeah, my thought on it is even if it's not televised, kids are going to get their reps and they're going to still hit that portal window. They'll have the same opportunity to send all that film, like saying they played well in this situation, because you wouldn't tamper for a kid that sucks. But if a kid goes off, he still has access to that film and he can still send it out. That's part of the the transfer process. That's part of getting recruited. That's how it works. I don't know. I think it's just another, subhead and a larger issue within this whole football schedule that we have for the offseason in college football. Right. But to me, like I'm sure he's upset, but he's not the only one dealing with it. He's not the only roster that's had the issues. I'm sure they're, everybody's part of the problem, because you kind of have to be to stay ahead of things, to keep your own roster, to, make things happen. So for me, it's like, it's not going to change much, in my opinion. Like, I feel like he feels that way and he feels strongly about it. That's fine. Do that. More like the fan base. Like, are you still going to let the fans in? You said, because that's it's a popular thing to do. Like, Nebraska fans like to attend the spring game. So you're going to let them do that, or how is it going to go about it? Maybe it's just smoke and mirrors, just something to say and bring some more attention to the idea that he's trying to encapsulate.
Rule said, wasn't he the guy who said quarterbacks are going for some insane number, $5 to $10 million? I don't remember exactly.
He said $1 to $2 million, but yeah, he did put a number value on it.
So he's been pretty open about kind of all what goes behind the scenes, I guess. Which is the media.
Like this topic was more based on, I listened to the full press conference, and I feel like he was talking about more the players that are maybe not considering transferring and using that film, but people reaching out because of that film. Like maybe players in the back of their head, like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't. But then all of a sudden this coach sees it and he's like, dude, I'll give you $350,000 to come to my school right now. And they're like, all right, fuck it. I'll hit the portal. I'm going to make
that's a fair thing.
$20,000 more.
But I am going to go on a limb here and say most kids that are going to get recruited were already on watch list prior to the spring game. I can't imagine there's a billion names out there. Like obviously kids blossom once they get into college. Like I'm talking like a kid, maybe you sign in a 26 class, 27 spring game. He sits out that whole 26 season, 27 spring game. He's going to be a sophomore. He's ready to roll. And now he's kind of flourishing. Like he grew a little bit, put a little muscle on. Now he's a hell of a, a slot receiver or something. I just think coaches have basically these scouting departments, and they're probably doing this with all like they know the names, people talk, stuff like that. So I think it could help a little bit, but it's not going to help and change what the issue is at a larger.
What's the reaction in Lincoln like they canceled the? Because I know that's everybody. That's a big passion.
I mean, if it's to save players, I think people would be fine with it. But they also they floated ideas doing like a fall sports day. So it would be, volleyball, I'm sure would be represented in that, along with football and other fall sports going on, where it's just like a featuring of, everybody's on the football field and you do football practice.
It's like Ole Miss. You guys remember Ole Miss last year? Didn't they have
where they did played basketball?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that Matt Rule's against playing an FCS team in the spring.
Yeah,
if he doesn't like scrimmaging himself, he would not. McNeese State ain't coming to town. That's all.
If he would do it in the spring as long as it was FCS. He's only verbalized like there's no point in playing the big games out of conference. So like when we're scheduled to play Tennessee,
that's a whole
home and away, 26 and 27. So I think he would do it if it was FCS, but literally nobody with a pulse. I don't know. I think you can convince him.
I think when somebody pitched this idea on another podcast I listened to, like, why don't we just give the whole entire spring semester off for the teams? Like it's just strength and conditioning and it's agility. And then the summertime, it's like OTAs, like you're installing stuff. Everybody's finally on campus. You use that time because you can't practice in the summer. That would be illegal. But now it is. Maybe you spend all of June, finally doing some spring ball stuff or just installing some offense. Like, and these guys are supposed to be college.
Just flip these windows.
Kind of a little bit, and that gives like, I don't know, it just sets so much. I'm thinking of like the teams that just get set back for the spring window, and it just kind of messes everything up. And then what's the point of spring practice when they're just trying to keep everybody? But now by June, you have everybody on your roster. Iowa State's been a program that's never really had a big spring game, so I'm not even used to really seeing it that much. Whereas
Iowa doesn't even really do it. They do a couple plays live and practice.
So like we still claim these guys are student athletes, right? Like let's just make them like actually use the student part first in the spring and then just strength and conditioning.
Stop.
And then hey, I'm
don't
just saying
go the student part first. Well, some of these kids are making
athlete
$1
students
million.
Well, they're still going to. I mean, they still have to.
On.
They can't play.
I
they
didn't
can't play with that. They might make
three.
They might make that's fine. They might make $3 million, but they still can't play if they fail all their classes. Like they still got to pass.
Now we're gonna go down a rabbit hole. You're telling me that Carson Beck was in class every single day doing everything.
I'm not telling
me that all these kids are just.
I'm not saying he's at the front of every class. Relax.
Like you're saying, the professor that's grading his paper isn't like dressed in red. Like
it's okay, fine. Okay, time out. It's fine. This is the off season. We can get on tangents. Do you guys legitimately think that like some of those kids like don't even sniff a home? Like they have somebody just doing it. Like they have never touched a paper.
It's been going on since the beginning of time in this sport, and now you've thrown more money at them, more money and all that. Come on, Jacob. I understand what you're saying, but you can't sit there and say, you know what they should do in the spring? Just lift and go to class. Are you shitting me? Come on.
I'm more thinking for the coaches. I'm not even thinking for the players because
I think the coaches need more than a reworked spring. They need it's a whole rework of a whole thing.
Because they're spending like everybody just talks about how they spend the spring just like we're making sure that our second string tight end's not transferring. That's what we're spending the entire spring. So what's the point of the spring game? It goes back to my point. What's the point of the spring? What's the point of spring practice? Like, why don't we just do this in June?
Because you had kids that also transferred in January and December.
What exactly? So
that's especially for the kids' first installment into the program. You got to have something going on. Imagine if these kids have to wait till July.
Well, no, here's another thing. Yeah, exactly. You decided to transfer. You transferred in. How many retransfers did we have? Twice. what are the odds you're going to transfer again when you're not even going through spring practice? You don't know where your spot's at on the team. You're just lifting, you're just running, you're competing. And then in June,
Yeah, it could cut down
crap,
that.
both windows are done. Now you just have to decide where you're at on the team.
I like the earlier window rather than the later window. Give them a chance
That's
to go
fine
through
too.
spring.
Either one's
We'll
fine.
say-
I'm not arguing that.
Putting a cap on this conversation, we had a good comment from our boy who's in the chat tonight. Nebraska did lose a couple of players on their spring game last year. That was another part of his conversation is, spring games, playing active spring games, which a lot of people have gone away from, whether or not it's like the old Miss method where you're sort of televised, you just might be playing basketball. It could cost you a few players if you're playing it for real, which not saying that wouldn't have happened, but just another reason to be like, let's skip that. Maybe not going full go and trying to make a cut on the turf in April is not maybe the best decision. But all right, let's leave spring talk and tampering talk there. Let's go to the point of tonight's show. We're going to skip over one part just because we're 45 minutes in, but let's talk the G5. We've been waiting all show for it. Let's go into ranking the G5 conferences in 2024 by the conference as a whole. Who do you think performed the best? Whether it be the Mountain West, would it be the American, would it be Conference USA? And tell us why. Let's start from the back and go forward as a group. Starting at 5, just give your fifth team and give the reasons why your fifth overall conference. Jake, you go first.
Yeah, I think to me, the worst conference, and I have some of my notes like specifically different categories, but if we're just going overall worst conference in college, G5, I guess it would be considered college football as well, is the Mountain West this year. I thought the Mountain West was down.
Whoa, the worst?
Yep.
That's stunning.
All right.
That's a stunning.
That's
fine.
stunning
That's-
I think the bottom 5 of the Mountain West was as bad as it gets.
Okay.
And that's why I was a little bullish on Boise getting into the playoff. Maybe like Parks was making an argument for last year, like Memphis. Boise sleptwalked through an entire Mountain West schedule in which it's just not very good. The quote unquote third best team in that league was Colorado State. They were 1 win away over Fresno of getting into the Mountain West title game. They got beat by like 40 against Miami of Ohio. Like it wasn't the same team competing there. And I was all on Miami of Ohio, by the way. But just you look at the bottom, like Wyoming, Utah State. I feel like I'm even leaving a couple of teams out. New Mexico they were better. They weren't great. UNLV wasn't good. Or not UNLV, sorry, Nevada. Nevada wasn't good. It was just like it was Boise, it was UNLV, and then the rest were I thought were just not good football teams.
Okay. That was a shocking pick to start it. I guess I'll probably go back to where I thought we were probably all going to be, but I had my fifth, or I guess worst conference in college football this year being the Conference USA. Least interesting. I thought the best storyline out of it was Sam Houston State being their first year in and being competitive the way they were, but Jacksonville State being at the top, just the way the season ended with those Jacksonville State and Western Kentucky games going the way they did just weren't good for the conference. I think the fall off of Troy, where they had been in the program, I'm sorry, not that. That was from my Sunbelt notes. Read the wrong notes, but they still had fun upsets overall as a conference. So I don't think it was like a bad season. It was just out of the G5s, it just was an underwhelming one from Conference USA. You didn't get like the standout La Tech team or anything fun to be on the national picture of college football. It's just Jacksonville State was pretty good. That was your storyline of the year, and that's what makes you the worst conference. What do you think, JP? What was your reasonings behind Conference USA being the fifth?
Yeah, I had them as the worst for a couple reasons. I like Jake is talking about like the bottom of the conference in the Mountain West is bad. How about I raised you New Mexico State, FIU, Middle Tennessee, and Kennesaw. I could go up to
Pretty good
UTEP.
argument.
I could go up to Louisiana Tech. Another part of this is like this wasn't as good as a Western team as we've seen in recent years. This isn't a very good Liberty team that we've seen in recent years. Jacksonville State, I think, is probably holding your hat for most of it. I'm just kind of looking back on what they did. They did pump a Sunbelt team earlier in the year, and then they also, I believe, they got. Coastal ran them early in the year too. So like your champion got run by a team in the Sun Belt that wasn't very good. It was a better Jacksonville State team this year than I thought in last year. But I think overall the conference was down. Like we're used to seeing a better Liberty, a better That the Sam Houston team, I think, is going to be the norm we see in that conference, a better Western team. So I just kind of think that the top of the league was down, along with just consistently having those normal bottom feeders that were pretty bad. Let's be real.
Yeah. Good. I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm going back to you, JP. We'll go snake style here.
Yeah.
JP, you kick us off for 4.
I'm going to go Sunbelt.
Me too.
And I usually would not. I had pounded my chest, and we got an argument last offseason with somebody who was very upset that we called the Sun Belt as one of the better G5 conferences. But this year, like, it was down. Like, it was down quite a bit.
Yes.
App was rough. And Marshall's not a bad champion, but I don't think that Marshall team was that great compared to what we've seen in recent history within the conference. But it's very close with who I have just a slot above them. So, for James Madison not to be very good, for App to be as bad as it was, Texas State to really not hit kind of their stride. Like, I just feel like the Sun Belt didn't have its year the way it probably should have. Jacob, what do you
I
want?
would. I
got
agree
them
with
number
all
1?
those points.
We're gonna have some differences, I guess.
JP and I have not yet. I think all of his points were fantastic. You mentioned the down year for App, down year for Coastal, underwhelming Texas State was one of my notes, like from what we thought they'd be in the preseason. And I think if you look at that Marshall team, which JP mentioned, the champion, and how they competed against Ohio State and got just blasted. I mean, granted, it was earlier in the season, but if you look back on like the fun Sun Belt years that we were talking to, maybe in the past, but like those App State teams were competing with teams at least longer in games than that champion was. So I just thought overall, the best of the best in the Sun Belt just wasn't up to par with what the Sun Belt usually has, at least in my mind. I mean,
Jake, I'm
Louisiana
starting to think
was
we rank
legitimately
these
good, though.
differently. You went
A
on
little-
like terms of interesting and enjoyable. I went on based talent
No.
and like how good the conference was.
I went like top to bottom talent, and I'll kind of get to that.
All right.
Air Force also. I didn't mention Air Force in my horrendous teams this
They
year.
were bad. Correct.
Air Force was bad.
All right. Give us
number
your 4,
4,
Jake.
Conference USA. I don't. It's kind of all the same reasons you guys have. USA. There's not much of an argument. Like, I'm not saying Mountain West was head
You're
and
gonna stand on
shoulders
this
the
hill and
worst.
tell me right now that it's the 4th.
See,
best.
so the way I thought about it, I just think them beating each other this year in Conference USA kind of made the league look worse. Like, it's hard to argue when you have Boise just running the whole league and you're like, well, they had the best G5 team. That's fine. But outside of that, I didn't think the Mountain West offered much. I thought Jacksonville State got much better as the year went on. I thought Sam Houston was solid. Liberty took a step back, but I thought, they were right in the middle of the pack. And then, am I forgetting a 4th team? Western, I thought was, they were decent too. I thought they could score on anybody. But yeah, you're not going to get much argument from me with like your Middle Tennessee, your Kennesaw State. I thought UTEP took some steps forward. I know
Liberty, by the way.
I understand that part. That one makes my argument look rough. Everything in this argument, Liberty doesn't back me up on. But even like UTEP, I think could compete with anybody in the Mountain West. And now they are a Mountain West school, which is ironic enough.
That's a crazy statement. I wonder if
Sorry,
that's a hot
not
take
okay.
or cold
Okay,
take.
fine. Outside of Boise and UNLV, I think they would have been.
Dude, I think
able
you
to
take
punch
even
their
the
own way.
bottom feeding teams out of that conference. You take Wyoming versus UTEP. I probably
I think
the
it's
Cowboys there.
It's no more than a 3-point spread if it's on a neutral field. No
Ooh.
shot. Wyoming
Man,
was
I think-
terrible. It was so
I don't
bad.
think you watch UTEP very much.
I did.
Oh
I
my
did.
God.
They were on Tuesdays.
Yeah, they own Tuesday this week. All right, Jake, back to you for the 3rd spot. This is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, this will get interesting. I have the MAC because you guys just pointed out the Sun Belt there. I'll put the MAC at 3. I still think like you can't have Kent State in your league and be a top 2 league G5. I mean, that team is. There are power rankings out there that have them not even in the top 25 of a Division II level type of football. Like, it's one of the worst football programs of all time. And on top of that,
they did have one of our better previews, though. Let's briefly mention that. If you haven't gotten that clip, go back and watch Reese break down Kent State's preseason look. It's one of the better clips of this show's history. But go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
Great. No, and then like NIU who beats Notre Dame, and it's like they're gonna, make the MAC look good. They didn't show up. Toledo, like I said, there's no reason Toledo shouldn't be winning 10 games a year and shouldn't be in the MAC championship. Said that last episode, and just like losing the games to like Buffalo is just completely crazy. I love Ohio. I would have taken Ohio against any G5 team in the country, including Boise State. But outside of that, I thought they were in the middle of that, like your Western, or not even Western, your Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, Kent State, just Northern Illinois, just bad football teams that, yeah, they're smack dab in the middle, because I think the top had some decent teams.
I have the MAC at 3 as well. We're on the same page there. I think Miami of Ohio kind of having that rough start to the year, like they did hurt the conference overall from not maybe being the best G5, but Ohio bouncing back the way they did with the new coach and a new look, and their quarterback hits the portal, goes to Indiana, and you saw the success he had. Them still being an 11-win football team and being as dominant they were was really good. And plus, you got to take into account they were really good in bowl season. The MAC was 5-2 this bowl season, a really impressive put out. So not a good overall year for the MAC because some of the players at the top just underperformed early in the season, but good nonetheless for like Buffalo to get back in the mix. I see that as a positive sign. I know they're a middle tier football team when it comes to terms of college football as a whole, but in the MAC, Buffalo being good is good for the conference and good for the sport. So good to see them get to 9 wins was a good sign. And I have the MAC at 3 as well. JP, who do you have 3?
Mountain West. I just like bad down year for them. Your top 2 were head and shoulders above everybody else in the conference. With Colorado State being 6-1 in the conference, that tells me a lot because that wasn't a very good Colorado State team.
How about Fresno? Now I know bad circumstances first month of the season, but still, like, they weren't good either.
Yeah, it was just a rough year for the Mountain West, and historically one of the easily top 2, if not the best G5 conference in a lot of these years. So I have them 3 just because I truly think outside of the top 2 that there's a big cliff, and kind of getting to step back and look at the conference from the outside after the season's over to really see where that step down happened. And how drastic it really was.
All right. JP, back to you for 2.
MAC. I have the MAC at 2. And I don't usually do this because I think there's a lot of years where the MAC is not. But that Miami of Ohio team was good. That Buffalo team gave teams a lot of trouble. Bowling Green gave multiple power conferences.
Great
power
mention,
conference
Bowling
teams
Green.
runs. I think that Ohio team was really good. And so I'm not going to tell you that this is the best the MAC has ever been, but for what the other conferences did, I feel like the MAC had more overachievers and better teams than other conferences did. Every other conference had underachievers, had teams that weren't playing up to snuff, that weren't very good. I would take the top 4 in the MAC versus Liberty. I would take Ohio, I would take Miami, Ohio, I'd take Buffalo, and I'd take Bowling Green. I'd take them all.
I'd take them by double digits.
And my whole thing with that is just, like, if you're going to have a team in Buffalo that has a low win total and go play really well in the MAC and win a lot of games and go 6-2, and then Bowling Green goes 6-2, oh, Bowling Green was 7-6. Yeah, Bowling Green took Penn State and A&M like into
to the wire.
Like,
yeah.
And so I think that needs to be highlighted a little bit more. And then when the middle of your conference, like NIU was not good. I had them, playing for a MAC title. I thought they'd be a lot better. They ran into a lot of issues. But when the middle of your conference goes and beats a team like Notre Dame, I think that helps you. It's almost like it negates all the negative that happened at Northern Illinois this year. So that's why I have them at 2.
All right. I like that. I think it was a good mention of Bowling Green. Jake and I kind of did a smaller job of that. Bowling Green was a really good football team this year, a fun one to bet on. They were just a few plays short here and there, but you have the leading receiver in the country and your tight end, Harold Fannin. So nonetheless, one of the better players in college football, obviously, statistically. So you got to mention that.
Saw something this weekend. His draft stock is dropping. He didn't perform as well in like one-on-one receiving situations.
Yeah, it gives a shit about the NFL, man. He was dominant at Bowling Green. That's how I'll always remember him. Even if he's standing on the sideline, practice squad for the Vikings, he was dominant at Bowling Green. I have the Mountain West at 2. Boise State, obviously your G5 playoff representative, best player in the country, plays on your team. But then UNLV stuck out a lot to me in this spot because I think one thing I took into account for all these decisions I made was the way they competed against the top talent, like Boise State going on the road to Eugene and the way they did. I mean, people forget, but that UNLV team went and beat a ranked Kansas team who was at the highest of highs at the beginning of the season. And then they just fell short to Syracuse. I mean, if they don't lose that Syracuse game, they're probably floating in the top 15 teams in the country at that point. Like that UNLV team was for real. And they were in the conversation later in the season to maybe just be a win and be in with Boise State. They could have been the G5 representative. So two of the best G5 teams in college football at the top of your conference, followed by a Colorado State team, which never really felt real after the Colorado game, but they just kept winning. And they had the talent on the outside. They got banged up with Torrey Horton, but Fowler Nicolosi, if he wasn't throwing the ball to other teams, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the G5, but he does it too often to say that. And that was with a down year of Wyoming, who's usually a bigger player, and Air Force, who is a bigger player. So I thought it was impressive nonetheless, and it was still a fun conference to watch. And, you know, you have the best player in college football. It definitely helps out your case to be a good high G5 ranking. Jake, you're number 2.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one between my final two, but you guys kind of convinced me, and I'll just stick to where I'm at. I have the Sun Belt at number 2. I thought it was close. I actually think the Sun Belt still. I think the Sun Belt still could be the deepest league out of all 5 of these. I that's what really made me consider putting them at number 1. I mean, the second worst team in the league outside of Southern Miss. The second worst team in the league was Georgia State because they beat Vandy this year. Georgia State beat Vandy. We forgot about that. It's just kind of crazy. I can still say that this is a deep league. This is a talented league, but I said it in August. So I'm not surprised. This league crucifies each other. It's just a cannibalism league, and they all just kind of eat each other alive. Really wish Texas State could have taken that next step and represented them amongst the best in G5, but there were times they looked the part. They honestly should have beaten Arizona State. They had more chance to beat them at home. James Madison beats Carolina, scores 70 points in Chapel Hill, and then Georgia Southern just going toe-to-toe with Boise for game of the year. They put up 50 points on those guys too. So I think the Sun Belt was still vastly underrated. Louisiana had a nice year, but that's why the AAC will be my number 1. I mean, they lost the head-to-head to Tulane. So we'll talk about the American in a second, but yeah, Sun Belt for me at 2.
All right, there it is. Everybody, unanimous decision at number 1. The best group of 5 conference this season for all of us is the American. And I'll go first because Jake didn't seem to want to do so. Here's my statistical rundown. 3 10 wins or more teams. Tulane being on the outside of that at 9 wins, especially with the Power 4 games they played in. 6-2 in the bowl season. They won the Bowl Cup, as you may say. They actually tweeted the picture about 2 hours ago live. And then you have Army in that, Navy in that, Memphis in that. Memphis was an 11-win team again. Tulane, South Florida, who was competitive early in the season, and then it fell off really badly, but they were competitive against Bama for 3.5 quarters of that matchup. And then North Texas dominated the offensive statistical categories all throughout college football the entire season. One of the most productive offensive. And then ECU, who was an 8-win team, really felt like they lost their way, but that was the middle of the pack of your conference, and they were
lost their coach. They fired their coach in the middle of the season,
and they still won 8 games. So I mean, it was still pretty impressive. The top was obviously it was a little top heavy, but the teams at the top were so dominant within college football, and you kind of saw it take flight in bowl season. And I love the American being good, but I had to give a quick shout out to my Mean Green, just an offensively dominant in every category. Jake, your reasons for the American being your number 1?
Yeah, best coaches: Newberry, Golish, Monken, Summerall, Silverfield, all really, really good. The top 3 teams, they were all the top 3 teams in the G5. I would take all 3 of these teams against Boise and UNLV, Tulane, Memphis, Army. Army joining the league obviously really helped.
Memphis, Boise State would feed families. I think Ashton GT might run for 1,100 yards.
That's fine. already forgetting Memphis's running back, but I think he could run for 1,000 yards too.
Well,
The
Seth
South
Hannigan,
Carolina transfer.
Seth Hannigan would throw for 300, but dude, they
Yes,
literally might
and
give
then-
up 1,100 yards to Ashton GT.
And that's my point. Like, I think they had the better quarterback running back duo than Madsen and Genty. But
That's fair.
anyways, hypotheticals. Sorry, what? Go ahead.
No. I'm just a little taken back by that. I think you're giving way too much. I feel like that's a little bit more on the.
Mario
You're taking
Anderson.
Memphis running back.
Mario
Yeah,
Anderson.
I know,
Could
but
not remember
you're
that
taking-
running back's name.
you're not taking Mario Anderson head to head with Ashton GT. That's a
No,
Madsen
no.
versus Hannigan battle you're talking about.
I said quarterback running back duo versus quarterback running back duo. The combination
I
of the
don't
two. But yeah, I just think like Army coming into the league was huge for them this year. Even the outlier, like SMU jumps to the ACC and then makes the 12-team playoff, can still make the American look really damn good and represented them that way too.
Fair.
So it was, kind of shocking that we didn't get the G5 representative from the AAC this year. But again, kind of like the Sun Belt, just can't beat on each other. Unfortunately, when you're the G5, you got to have one that just stands above the rest, and they didn't have that this year. But overall, talent wise, there's a reason why these AAC teams are making jumps to P4 leagues because they're the closest.
Absolutely. JP, your reasons for the American being at the top outside of what we've already named, which is a lot.
Yeah, I would just say that I feel like the top of this conference is like head and shoulders above the top of other conferences. I think the Mountain West is the only one with a true argument to it with their top two. But the top four in this conference, I think when you get down to East Carolina, like it sucks they have a Liberty and an App loss on that schedule from last year, and that kind of disproves our point in some spots. But I think that if you look at the American across the board, traditionally has some of the best playmakers in the country, some of the best quarterbacks like Schaefer saying best coaches in some spots, some really good defenses mixed in there as well. Army was really good when they weren't playing Power 4 competition. Tulane was good in a lot of circumstances. Memphis, not. But like you got to the bottom of it, I feel like it struggled with, UABs, Temples, FIUs, Tulsa's, things like that. But I do think that it's just a conference that holds itself to a higher standard than most G5s and has kind of shown that they are, something to be reckoned with.
All right. Shout out to the American. They take the top spot in our rankings of the group of 5 conferences in 2024. We will cover all of the group of 5 conferences going into the 2025 season. If it's your first time ever watching the show or being a part of it, we preview all 134 teams on this show. We'll talk about every single one of them, even if they're supposed to suck ass. So that's why you're here. Hit the subscribe button.
Shout out Kent State.
We will preview. Comment comes in from GA. We'll briefly throw it up there while we're talking about it. But the American is also a super fun baseball league. That is 100% true. Definitely tune that in when it comes to baseball season upcoming here in a few weeks. But
Next
with
week.
everything, next week. Oh, yeah. I thought it was 2
Next
weeks
Friday.
away for some reason. God, it's already February 3rd. All right, that's everything we wanted to cover tonight. We talked about those G5 conferences, a lot of recent news coverage. Next week, we're going to be a little bit more fun with some things.
It's going to
We're
be
talk
so much fun.
uniforms, helmets, all that good stuff, all that good, fun off-season jazz, just to build some hype going into the 2025 season. We do appreciate you being here. We want to give a friendly shout-out and a reminder to Shop No Rivals, our good partner over at No Rivals, shopnorivals.com, and use the code PTFS at checkout for free shipping on all your premium collegiate headwear. Fun fact, if you hadn't seen my tweet today, they dropped Nebraska. We've been here since June. They have the Huskers. So go on there, GA, get your Husker hat, use the code PTFS at checkout, and we'll cover the shipping for you. So we love you, No Rivals. We love you for being here. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We'll see you next week. Jake, take us away.
Have a great week, everybody. Let's play it.